Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Adam Patrick, creator and host of the Age of Information podcast. Fun fact, deep lore, Adam was my first interview back in the 2-Bit podcast days. Was the first interview I ever did was with Adam Patrick. An interview that I never re-listened to because I thought, like, oh my God, I fucking suck. I'm the worst at everything. But Adam seems to, it went well enough because we've remained friends and contacts ever since. So it's good to have you back on, Adam.
Thank you. I think it's weird. If you ever meet somebody who enjoys listening to their own podcast, stay as far away from that human being as you possibly can. Like, oh, I can't wait to go back, listen to 2 hours of me talking why would in the world would anybody want to do that? Most people don't want to do it when I'm talking to them, let alone listen to myself talking.
It's my problem with editing too, right? Because it's like I know I should go back and edit and make clips and all the rest of it. And I'm like, I don't want to listen to me again. I got to listen to my dumbass talk for 2, and then you catch stuff. You're like, I'm an idiot. And
dude, you want to hear something funny? So when I started during COVID, I got one of those USB mics, and I had my phone was the switchboard, right? I don't remember how I did it, but somehow I hooked it up to my phone, and that's how people would call me on my phone to have the conversation. It was just audio, no video, and the sound quality was so bad, and I was so paranoid about it not sounding perfect that, say we had a 2-hour conversation, right? I would go back and spend like 3 days editing out all the little blips and silent parts, and just like, I don't know what I was what I was thinking. I think I remember talking to Pete Quinones or somebody, and they were like, you do what? Why do you do that? Just go get a better microphone and a computer. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I could just probably make more sense, right?
I've done the same thing where you go through and you're like, every little hiss or every little tiny obsessively taking out gaps, and then you start hating your life, and you're like, why am I doing this? Why does anyone do this?
We had like 6 listeners to the early episodes too. So like my mom, or like my ex-girlfriend, the dude down the road. I was like, oh, they're really going to appreciate all this time I'm putting into it. You know, like,
no one cares. No one notices. No one cares. No, absolutely none. Adam, I brought you on to catch up, say hi, how you doing? How's you going, as they say in Australia? And also talk about where the West went wrong, specifically around philosophy, which is your wheelhouse. Wheelhouse? I've been turning into, this is early in the morning for me. I turn into Elmer Fudd apparently before 9 p.m. Everything is sort of like just.
Yeah, I don't think people understand. Like, so in order for us to hook up to do this, and probably anyone you're talking to in the States, it's a 12-hour difference. So like my day is pretty much over and I'm exhausted, and your day is just starting and you just woke up and you're exhausted. So like the fact that we could even put this together and make it coherent at all is pretty amazing.
Well, hang on, we're early stages, my friend.
Okay,
I've got we got at least an hour for me to completely crap the bed. So, hopefully the computer doesn't blow up. Adam, let the people know, in case people don't know who you are. Give a brief synopsis of yourself and the channel. Get your bona fides in there.
Yeah, and then like many of the people in our kind of little circles, I got bored during COVID and wasn't working, and decided that why not start a podcast? Because what else are you going to do, right? Everybody else was getting drunk, and I didn't want to drink by myself, so I decided to start a podcast. And it was really just me talking to my restaurant friends for like 11, 12, 13 episodes, because all the restaurants were shut down. That's what I do for a living. And eventually, for some reason, I stumbled into the libertarian circles, which I wasn't really, on Facebook, I knew some libertarians, but I didn't know any in real life, and I never really talked about libertarianism. I just fell into that group, and then immediately stopped being a libertarian. So the early show was sort of exploring libertarianism in the midst of the COVID thing. And then over the course of time, talking to different people, I ended up going from essential atheism, like I wouldn't have called myself an atheist, but definitely not a Christian, to an Orthodox Christian. And then so the show pivoted to a mixture of philosophy and theology. Really, it's all just trying to figure out what's interesting to me at that moment, and then if I have time to even put it out, and if I can find someone interesting to talk to. So, I think there's probably better content out there than what I put out, but I hope that what I do put out is interesting or helpful to people. So I don't know.
Hell of a sales pitch, Adam. We worked in hospitality. You're like, you know, the chicken's better down the street, but we got some chicken. I mean, you might as well. You're here, so you might as well have it. I mean, it's fine. It probably
Yeah, I
won't
guess
kill you.
for I think almost everyone that I know who does podcasting, they take it really seriously and they want it to like be a thing, you know. And I just never like I want to be good at what I do, but like I've multiple businesses that I run on a day-to-day basis. My wife's in real estate too, and we do a bunch of stuff. And it's like this is really a hobby for me. And when it stops being fun, I stop doing it. Like when it starts to feel like work, you know, I don't want to do it anymore. But you know, I had this whole grand idea that starting this year or next year, I would do like a history of Western philosophy, you know, series on the show, like maybe 200 episodes or something, where I just pull a bunch of university professors from all over the political spectrum and have them come on and give their opinion on whatever it is that they're an expert at. Because I know a lot of people in academia pretty well. And I think that could be a lot of fun. The problem is the logistics of that is like overwhelmingly complicated to get these people and their schedules to match up. And it's like, do I want to sit there and just talk to the screen for 2 hours? Like I wouldn't watch that. So I just feel like if we're going to do it, we'll do it right. And it'll be interesting enough to me that it'll be interesting to other people. So maybe we'll get to that at some point. Maybe not.
That's fair enough. Ladies and gentlemen, we're streaming this over to members, so most of the people watching this live are going to be members, but I'm putting some money aside to get a new video card for the computer. I think that's part of my tech issues. So send on some money over to Streamlabs is always the best way of doing it, or over on PayPal. The links are in the description below. And put some money aside and get a new tech thing and keep on improving the Mironchucknow ecosystem. So appreciate all the support. And of course, when this episode gets out, it'll be over on Spotify and Substack. So keep an eye, follow me on X, and keep your eyes open for any announcements and updates. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Okay, orthodoxy and the philosophy of the Enlightenment. Basically, two things running more or less in parallel. Obviously, orthodoxy is older, but we can look back at the Enlightenment. You famously, when I first started talking to you 4 years ago, had made the statement the Enlightenment was a mistake. Something that Father Seraphim Rose also echoes. His ideas that the first schism really was a mistake. That's where things started going awry. But we can look back at the current situation in the West. A lot of people are looking for fixes and cures and ways to fix the ills of the West, whether it's through immigration, different policies, the last 60 years of civil rights, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what I've always been sort of sensitive to is that people aren't thinking big enough in some ways. I call it the liberal frame. So all things liberal are kind of contained in that frame. We can go through all the ideologies. We can get down to nominalism, down individualism, egalitarianism, all these central philosophical claims about how the world works or how the world should work and how human beings should operate within it is contained in that frame. And it's breaking that frame allows you to kind of get a sense of how screwed we are in some ways, and also I think provides hope because you can do it. It's not impossible. It's a mental frame that you were inherited. You've accepted. I'm saying you, the royal you. We've accepted. We're operating in, but we can break it. It's a mind trap. But you always also need some place for people to go. So in diagnosing the liberal frame, we can get down to the core philosophies of it. We were talking yesterday in preparation for the show, and you brought up Rousseau, which is a name that I think a lot of people sleep on, because the bigger names like Hegel, Kant, Nietzsche, are sort of the more modernist superstar philosophers of the past, is where a lot of, especially dissident right wingers, counterculturalists, kind of get attracted to. But they sleep on Rousseau and they sleep on Mills, and in my in my regard, it's like those the two that kind of substantiate egalitarianism. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but from egalitarianism, that's to me the stepping off point where we get into the real sort of mental mind trap that leads to Marxism, secular humanism, all these other abstractions as just as a way to get away from God. Seems to be the ultimate end of everything. But anyways, that's a lot to throw at you. You are the philosophy expert, so I will sit back and sit under Adam's learning tree and start wherever you like.
Yeah, I'm definitely not an expert at all. But although, to be fair to even myself, most of the people I know at the academic, that's not true. Most of the people. I know a lot of really good philosophy people at the university level. But if you're taking an undergrad philosophy course somewhere, I'm pretty sure I know more than that guy's teaching you. It's not that, it's a very low bar that we're setting here to say that, but it's probably true. So when I said all those years ago that the Enlightenment was a mistake, I need to contextualize that. When I said that, I meant that it's a mistake in the same way that like Adam and Eve in the garden eating the apple was a mistake. Like it's not comporting to reality the way that I see reality going. So it is a little bit subjective. It's not like the West was on a good path and then the Enlightenment became a mistake. Like right. It's the culmination of all of these things. And in order to say that something is a mistake or wrong or bad, it invokes the concept of the opposite being the more preferred option, right? So when I hear people say like the decline of the West or what's wrong with the West or we have to get out of this thing that's going on in the West, it's not always clear from the individual saying it, if I don't know them, that they're all starting from the same premise or premises. Like somebody might, like a Curtis Yarvin, who's really a classical liberal, in the more monarchical, tradition of classical liberalism, saying that the West is broken is different than Nick Land saying that the West is broken is different than Seraphim Rose saying that, you know what I mean? So they're all coming at it from different places. And I think it's impossible, and I believe this to be true, it's impossible for people to shed all of their life presuppositions. So like I can criticize something, but I have to stand in a position somewhere outside of it to do that. And without orthodoxy, and I guess I could say maybe Buddhism or Hinduism, any Eastern religion would be sufficiently outside of the Western paradigm enough to critique the Western paradigm. And until you can get out of it, if you're still in it, like if you're a Roman Catholic or a Protestant or a Dawkins style atheist or whatever, then you're really by default showing your admiration for Western civilization in some form or another. You just want to tweak it and move it and kind of put this piece over here and that's a little out of order, we'll put it back over there. And I don't agree with that at all. I would absolutely give up all of the comforts of whatever this is that we're living in. I'd be perfectly fine going back to something much more, I don't know, rural. And that's really the reason I bring that up is you bring up Rousseau, and Rousseau, not that I'm a Rousseauian, but he had a similar idea that, the state of nature was sort of like the perfect situation. And then we civilized ourselves, we defined private property, and then we fought over that. And so like how do we get out of that? Well, we can't go back to nature. So like the French Revolution tried to interpret him that way, right? But he knew you couldn't go back. So he was trying to figure out like, how can we get that in this world? And you can't get that in this world. Like that's what we found out as a result of Rousseau's ideas. You can't get that in this world. You're not going to go back in time. We're not going to go back to the pre-schism. We're not going to have an Orthodox United States of America. It's not going to happen. So in order to figure out where you're going to go, it really helps to understand sort of where you are and what your capabilities are. There's no point in arguing for monarchy in the United States. And like Yarvin's version of it's probably the most likely, Trump sending the troops out in National Guard out in DC to clean up the homeless people. Like that's going to be the version that I think those types of people want. I'm open to see how that goes. I'm not opposed to it. I'm not necessarily pro that. But and I know you're not saying this, but just for the listeners, I want to make clear, I'm not trying to go back to the Byzantine Empire or elect an Orthodox president. Like, it's not about any of that stuff. It's about, for me, situating myself in reality in such a way that I'm not constantly fighting the real world every single day. And you do these little adjustments to your life to, do I treat my employees well? Do I talk to customers well? Do I treat my wife well? Do I have a good relationship with my family? Am I looking to heal the harm that I've caused to people in the past? Like, how can I make these little differences? To me, that's a very orthodox way of thinking, as opposed to the grand archetypes of Protestantism and Roman Catholicism that are really like this constant battle between faith and reason and this dialectic back and forth. I mean, if you look at Hegel or any of these dialecticians, it's really just that. It's just a faith-reason dialectic that started early on in the Roman Catholic Church, and we're still kind of having that conversation. But the Roman Catholic Church didn't start that either. They got that from the ancient Greeks and the pre-Socratics. And so, like, I think Christianity, if you look at Christianity as an Eastern religion and Orthodoxy as its truest form, then that will give you the perspective to kind of critique these other things. And that's not going to be easy for people to get if they're a Western Christian or an atheist or a materialist. They're not going to understand a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. I hope they do, but I don't think it's really like possible in a lot of ways. So yeah, interested to see where you want to jump off at. But I came to Rousseau through Nietzsche, Nietzsche and Heidegger were really my undergrad focuses, and a lot of, like, I've read everything that I could find on both of those authors. I'm pretty sure every word they've ever written. Not that I remember them all, but I'm very impressed with the body of work there. And then by extension, Deleuze, which we were talking about before, Gilles Deleuze and Guattari, I think he's kind of a lunatic, but Deleuze's thought is very much a synthesis of a lot of those romantic, German idealist sort of thinkers, and then comporting that to a materialist reality. So yeah, man, I'm interested to see where you want to jump off. I just think it's important to say that, like, when I critique the West or whatever, like, I don't know if you can critique the West from the vantage point of a Western person without causing some issues there.
Well, I think it's sort of like there's the something that Yarvin said that I've incorporated here, being in Australia, is and he was talking more of a mental state of, like, becoming an expat. Like, uses the example, like, if you're in Costa Rica, you're aware of Costa Rican laws and cultures and norms and things you shouldn't do, like, hard rules and soft rules and that kind of thing. Which team to celebrate, soccer team to celebrate, and which one not to. And then you kind of just don't think about it, right? Like, you're existing. You're not Costa Rican. You're not, maybe you don't vote in the elections. You don't really care what happens there. It's more like you care about yourself and your own safety, but that's about it. And I kind of imported that idea when I came to Australia. My wife's Australian. My daughter's de facto Australian because of it. And I kind of just live here, and I pay my taxes and all that stuff, and I don't really comment on Australia because I'm just aware. I'm aware of what's going on. I make sure I know which way the wind's blowing, and then that's basically it. I don't really. I have nothing invested anymore, and that there's that separation that I think if people can attain it, and that doesn't always mean moving to a foreign country. I think you can do it in your own country, where you stop being so concerned about the results, the endpoints. And that's something that, as I've gotten deeper and deeper into orthodoxy, especially thought and practice, and this is kind of the meta reason for bringing you on the show and having these conversations going forward, is I think a lot of people maybe who are skeptics or who are seeking, or who are in that position of going, what do we do? There's this easy answer. There's this thing that breaks the frame and gives you a place to go. It's a 2,000-year tradition full of philosophy, theology, metaphysics, mysticism, all the things all the things that a lot of people are decentralized looking for, and it's all within orthodoxy, like all of it. Every time I look around for something else, like I'm like, does orthodoxy have an answer for this? I'm like, yep, there it is. And there's some saint or some church father or someone somewhere who's made a brilliant little, usually 50-page book that answers all the questions. Like one of the big ones for me early on was energies and essences, the energy essence distinction.
Yeah.
When I encountered that at age 40, whatever, I was like, oh, well, that answers a lot. That makes the Trinity make sense and makes a whole bunch of other things make sense. And what do you mean this has been around for like 2,000 years? What?
Right.
What? Where? Why isn't this being? Why aren't we talking about this? And for people who don't, I'll give a really crib version of it. The idea is that the essence of God is unknowable. We can't know the essence of God. We can't know, what the fullness of God. But we can interact with his energies, and energies can be his creation, and also metaphysical concepts like love, truth, beauty. All these sort of metaphysical categories are all the energies of God, and that we can understand and interplay with. That's a very condensed version. But I think that also solves a lot of the problems with Western philosophy, and kind of solves our situation now. Is that, like, I think you're right. People start to externalize these things. There is a desire within humanity, maybe in small amounts, but they tend to take over this idea of empire expansion. We're going to fix the world so that we can operate like we are in the world. The world's the problem, not us. Where orthodoxy turns it around and says, no, 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 the world's fallen. Like we're fallen. We created the fall. We're substantiating this fall. We're the problem. And if you fix you, then everything else is just everything else, and you don't have to really worry about it so much. So, yeah, I don't know where you want to take it from there, but it's sort of like these inversions, these micro inversions that happen along the way, get us to this point where now man thinks they have to create this moral system absent of God, even though it's just assuming the moral nature of God as a starting point, that we all just have this thing somehow magically.
Yeah.
And once you build from that assumption, when those assumptions don't pan out, when you hit these contradictions, it just leads automatically to authoritarianism. And this is where we're seeing this I think with the transhumanists and all this other technology. Is about, well, if you guys won't act moral, we're going to make you moral, one way or the other.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Rousseau makes that point too. Essentially, like, you'll force people to be free is his exact quote. So, I mean, yeah, it's interesting. This is, I think, where maybe I drive people a little bit crazy when I start picking apart words, and it sounds like trite and pedantic or whatever. But you're correct in saying that everyone wants to, quote, fix whatever, and it's not clear to me why that would even come up, right? I mean, the idea we need to fix government, or we need to fix the economy, or we need to fix culture, or we need to like how do you know it's broken? Is that a weird way to word it? Like, I'm asking somebody who, I don't know, voted for Kamala Harris in the last election, or she was running, right? Was Biden? I don't even remember who the fuck was running. But anyway, yeah, you voted like you're a milk toast, normal vanilla type of person walking around the street, and you went and voted for the Democrat for president because you want to, quote, fix the whatever. Like, how? Like, who told you it wasn't fixed? Like, what are you seeing that you want to, quote, fix? But clearly it's something. I don't think they're making it up, but it's like you never meet anyone anywhere who's like, no, everything's great. Like, where is that person? Like, everyone's always bitching and moaning and complaining about this or that and the other thing. And I'm not saying they shouldn't, but there's like this underlying presupposition that if you kind of question them about it, that like you're the weirdo for asking them, like, don't you know the world is broken? It's like, well, the world's broken according to what you think it should be. But isn't that just completely arbitrary and subjective? Like, why ought your concerns about the world matter? Especially if there is no meaning or purpose in life to begin with. Then it's just you have a personal preference for how you want things to be. But like, who are you to have a preference over? Like, why should I listen to you? Why should anyone listen to you? Why should the president listen to you? Why, to be a little like hyperbolic, that I was saying beforehand before we started recording, why ought I not just walk into your house, murder your family, steal all of your shit, and bring it over to my house and barricade myself with a tank? Like, Why ought I not do that? Well, like, is it wrong? Like, says who? Is it bad? Says who? Like, obviously you prefer not to die, probably, but so what? I mean, the worm that I put on the fishing hook when I went trout fishing, I'm sure preferred not to die either, if you were to find some way to ask it. But it did. So, I mean, what are you going to do? Right. So I just don't, I think this is where I start to lose people on the show sometimes, is getting into that kind of, like, there's no good argument past the preferred option for most people. And so you have, like you were saying, rabid individualism or enlightenment values or all of this egalitarianism, this idea that's like pre-programmed into people's heads from the interactions that they have with the world. And then they never question those things. They're just like, well, I just know now that something's wrong. Well, like, when you popped out of the womb, or Helen Keller, for example, right? When she was 8 or something, didn't have a preference of who the president was going to be, and didn't think the economy was in ruins, and didn't really care if there was a war going on, because she couldn't, like, see, or you know what I mean, talk, or like, right. So
allegedly.
Yeah, we can get into that too, but like, yes, right, yeah. But I mean, you understand what I mean, though? Like, you have to develop these ideas over time, which presupposes a whole bunch of things that become denied then when you are poking at your preference. And I just find that really, like, philosophically retarded in a lot of ways, like, and so the way that I've kind of approached that is sort of what you were getting at, which is to just disengage with most of it. And not to beat a dead horse here, but one of the books I was really pushing early on 5 years ago was Humusville from Ernst Junger, which people ought to really, Forest Passage is a good lead into that, but Humusville is the one you want to read about just detaching from reality. I know Yarvin talked about this book too a while back, but he seems to have forgotten about it. That's a good non-libertarian book in a way. Like, he's not a libertarian, but he's sort of like, well, Ernst Junger was like 100 when he died. So he'd lived through like 7, 8, or 9 different regimes in Germany, Austria, or whatever it was, right? Like the tiny mustache man, and you had the empire and all, Roman Catholic, Holy Roman Empire. And finally, he's just like, governments are going to govern and stuff's going to do stuff. So, I mean, right? Like, just do your thing, live your life, find a way to do whatever you're doing. And it helps if you kind of have some idea of what that is, right? Like, but it's hard. It's going to be hard for people who are really not, I don't want to say they're dumb, but I mean, you kind of have to do the work to get to the point where you can make a decision like that, or you're just going to get trapped in the machine like a hamster. You're never going to accomplish anything. You're just going to bitch, moan, and complain until you die. Like, it's not really doing any good. Kierkegaard called it snack, but really translates to something like chatter, just like about gossip chatter. The people just sort of small talk all over the place and don't really ever accomplish anything. I think that is all probably part of human nature in some respects, but when I use the word broken, or what we need to fix, is if your life, your human life, and by extension your community and your nation or whatever, are well comported to reality, a lot of those things will fall off. Like the hair will shed, or the skin will shed, and you will be able to grow something that sort of puts you in a more peaceful place. And I mean, you could go the Buddhist route for that. There's other, transcendental meditation. Orthodox Christianity is a form of that type of thinking. But you mentioned the essence energies distinction. It's a way of God being both transcendent and immanent in reality. And what that does as a metaphysical basis is it gives this world right here, right now, meaning and purpose. Not like a Buddhist who's constantly trying to escape this. Or I don't want to get into a whole thing on Buddhism. I know that's kind of not exactly correct, but this world is sort of in passing, and eventually we'll get to the something else, and just sort of coast through it stoically. But that you can't really live a life that way. You kind of have to go be a monk somewhere. And in Orthodoxy, yeah, we have monastics, but they're charged with protecting the faith, not running off into a cave somewhere and just dying alone, right? That's not what they do. And so but we're people who, like me and you, out in the world, we're the ones tasked with being Christian. We're the ones tasked with doing the work in this world to fix, heal, and repair this world right here, right now. That can't happen without a doctrine like the essence energies distinction. It can't.
Mm-hmm.
You're constantly going to find the people who are in the West, they're caught up in this dialectic. There's always like they're always faced with the opposite of a binary that they can't quite overcome. And so this pendulum swings back and forth constantly throughout the centuries and millennia, where nothing ever really gets accomplished because there's no balance, no structure in the overarching meta narrative of the culture itself. I think like orthodoxy would kind of have to take over the West, and it would have to be organic and emergent. People slowly convert. And then I think Dyer's put it this way before, where, you know, you'd have like, I don't know, 51% of the country becomes Orthodox Christian, and therefore they would vote that way, and they would run their businesses that way, and they would act that way, and things would just sort of happen. You can't really force it on people because it would lose its effectiveness. So I know it's kind of a long way to get there, but I think it's important to just lay that out for the people listening.
It's my complaint oftentimes with the Christian nationalist crowd, and I know that's a big, vague term. There's other guys like Andrew Wilson has made good arguments for it, but even with Andrew, he's like, look, it's not like it's here. Like he's not saying, oh, and we'll do this and it'll happen in 4 years kind of mentality. It's like, this is a generational something to shoot for, to keep your mind's eye fixed upon and build towards, which is something I keep echoing. Like, maybe we'll get into transhumanism on some level, but Peter Thiel, in his book 0 to 1, and this is also a Yarvin thing. Yarvin keeps getting brought up. Reach out to him to get him on the show again. It's understanding your power levels, right? Understanding how much you need to do to get something done, and then realizing, and then being brutally honest and go, can we do that? The example I think Yarvin uses that I have co-opted is, if you wanted to change a street sign in DC from Martin Luther King Boulevard to Trump Boulevard, how much energy would you need to do? Think of the enormity of that task. Just jot it down. It's huge. You'd be fighting battles and legal battles and media PR battles and all the rest of it just to change a street sign.
Yeah.
Then you want to do what? Deport millions of people in a 4-year window and have it go off without a hitch? Like, it doesn't compute. Like, you need enormous sums of power in order to get any of that stuff done. So where it comes down to, let's say Christian nationalism or reshaping, and again, I think other people think of this as a fix. It's not a fix. It's just a different form of system. And as you said, maybe one that's comporting to reality, a big giant R reality, more frequently. We've seen this with the Soviet experiment, where they try to restructure everything under this new mentality, zeitgeist. I mean, the secular humanism really was a Soviet push. They took it from Marx and then developed it themselves, and then let it loose in the West. That mind virus is trying to reshape reality in a new dynamic without anyone taking any responsibility for it whatsoever. This seems to be the big thing. I've watched tons of debates now with these secular humanists trying to do this, and you're like, you're so full of contradictions that at some point, the more you talk about this, obviously I'm dead set against it, but I can't imagine anyone listening to you explaining the system and going, well, that's obviously much better. Like, what, we're going to derive all our morality from consensus groups? Like, what? How can you go for the last 5 years after, like, especially during the COVID years, and think that's a good thing at all? Even if you're pro, even if you bought into the whole COVID narrative, hook, line, and sinker, you'd have to admit there were some mistakes made. Like, some things were probably unnecessary. Some things led to sort of deleterious effects. 1 or 2, right? Let's be generous. So I just don't. I think we're in a very particular point of history where, as I've said, the art of liberalism is stacking mental contradictions like plates stacked upon each other in like a cartoon dishwasher, a dish pit, and they're just swaying in the breeze and just waiting for one point of reality to go, nope, screw you. Not listening to your little pet theories. Rousseau's nice. Yeah, all your books, yada yada yada. How about this part of reality? Now deal with it. And I've had many different points of that. One of the big ones, the George Floyd protests, is what I've talked about. But even just when I heard them try to say that dinosaurs have feathers now, I'm like, nope, not buying it. Nope. Let's investigate this whole dinosaur thing. No. I'm not
see,
buying
there's a meme going. Well, I don't know if it's going around, but I saw it at one point. It's a skeleton, and it looks like I don't know, Stegosaurus or one of those long-tailed dinosaur things from like when we were kids, and they were reptiles back then or whatever. Right. And then it's like, fuck yourself, Saurus or whatever. Then next to it, there's the picture of a mouse. It's just a mouse skeleton with and you're like, so who says that this thing? No, listen, I don't want to get into a debate about the dinosaurs or evolution or whatever, but I mean, how can you take seriously somebody who's reconstructing flesh around what they are saying is a 60 million year old fossil? Like, that is an impossible task to do. Like, I realize it's not impossible because they're doing it, but there's a whole host of other things that have to be a certain way in order for that to work. And that's fine if you can demonstrate to me that all of those other things work, right? I'm not just going to accept those things. And that's really what you talked about Jim Bob earlier doing this. I love Jim. He's an awesome guy. I've talked to him so much, but I mean, that's really sort of his premise. It's like you have to, it's not just you have to agree to Darwin or you have to agree to dinosaurs. It's you have to agree to like wild leaps of dozens of other things that need to be the case in order to even like consider the premise of a 60 million year old odd bone, 3 or 4, but not even like a full skeleton. It's like 3 bones, and somehow you get a T-Rex out of that. Like it that doesn't compute. Now, I'm not saying that they're like making this up, but they're clearly working on a paradigm that is outside of the realms of the logic that they base their science on. Like, it's all faith-based at that point. I'm not saying it's not true. It's just they want you to take these things for granted. And when you question it, like, you get lumped in with like Glenn Beck or something, some goober like that. That's not what we're saying. Like, you can demonstrate to me that a 65 million year old, 3 bones you found turned into a T-Rex. Like, show me your work. Remember 3rd grade? Like, show me your work on the math table, right? Like, I don't see your work. Like, you're just like, oh, if you don't believe in dinosaurs, like, what are you, some kind of weird Protestant creationist Mormon? No, man, I'm just
flat
like
earther. Are you a flat earther?
Yeah. Like, what are we talking about? Like, why do we have to swing all the way in that direction and name call each other? Like, why don't you just demonstrate your work? Is that difficult? Like, why can't you just do that? And
well, especially because when you have kids, and then you realize how much of that propaganda is beamed into their heads. Like, it's just all dinosaurs at some point, right? All kid shows, eventually have a dinosaurs episode. And there I am with my daughter, and it's like, it's a tender one, right? Because I don't want her going to school or talking to people and like flat out being a dinosaur denial 5-year-old.
Sure,
because that's going to make things awkward. But it's like you have to kind of introduce these little ideas kind of tenderly, like, well, yeah, or maybe they were dragons, or maybe they were something else. Like, just like, maybe we'll look at other things. Just kind of pre-prepping her to that point where I'm going to sit down and go, okay, look, it's BS. Okay, don't understand this. It's nonsense. They can't reconstruct a dinosaur from a few bones. And even if they could, if they could do something like that, they certainly couldn't tell you what they eat. Like, that's not, it's a nonsense factory. But to bring it back to that philosophy and that sort of cornerstone of enlightenment, it seems to me like most of all this stuff comes down to being stuck in the what is. So you're stuck in whatever moment of time you're at, and you're trying to diagnose what that time and what led to that time. So even with the post-structuralists like Deleuze and Gagnon and a few others, they're looking at the history that they're living in and at that given moment, and trying to deconstruct everything else, deconstruct how they got there, reality up to this point, right? And fair enough, but there's always these massive assumptions. So if you're born in let's say in the 1920s, I'll say it this way. One of the interesting things of reading Father Severin Roses on creation, is in the introduction they're talking about how evolution as we know it, as it's being presented, really wasn't onboarded to the masses until like the 1950s. Like it was around, obviously, as an operating. Darwin was around, but no one really bought into it whole cloth, taught in schools. This is the narrative. You must believe in this, or you're a bogan, you're white trash, stupid person. That wasn't the narrative until about somewhere in the 1950s, and then it gets onloaded. So there's so if you were examining this thing, if you were trying to tell these people and tell the people about this stuff in 1920s, they probably look at you like you're an idiot. Like, what? No, like, what are you talking about? So I find that's interesting with philosophy, is that, and with let's say secular humanism and a lot of these sort of liberal policies that have brought us to this point, and now everyone's in open question or revolt of these policies. We're living in this crisis of consequences of all these policies and ideas. So now that we've gotten here and people are looking around, they're still only examining it from this point in history. They're not really.
Yeah, right.
You can only deconstruct it so far, and it's not really useful for people who are coming down, who might be inheriting our fixes, our solutions in 50 years or 100 years or 300 years from now. I don't know. That's a bit of a word salad. I don't know where you want to pick it up from there.
I think it's important to point out, you were talking about how, I mean, if anyone's ever read Inherit the Wind when they were, in like grammar school, whatever, it's the Stokes trial, whatever the word is for that guy trying to push creationism and Darwinism in school, whatever. It's interesting to note that what they were going up against in this sort of Protestant creationism narrative is also highly suspect, right? That like the way you get to Darwin is shitty Christianity, like a distilled, diluted bullshit Christianity that makes no sense at all, that people instinctively recognize as bullshit and want to throw off so they don't look retarded when they're talking to people. And the flip side of that, the people who dig into the retardation and end up like with these 2-digit IQs talking about like 6,000. I'm not bringing Seraphim Rose into this, but to talk about a 6,000-year-old Earth as if when you're accepting the presupposition of modernity, right? Like what you're doing in that sense is the same. You're coming to the playing field on the same presupposition as the Darwinist. You're accepting science, and you're like, well, obviously we would accept science, so let's go back into Genesis and just pretend it was written in 1950 to Einstein, right? Which it obviously wasn't, and wasn't meant to be taken that way. Now, I'm not saying that it's not meant to be taken literally, but we have a larger scope of looking at things like that. There's a 4-prong, hermeneutic and exegesis to how Orthodox Christians read Scripture. So it's not this goofy Protestant distillation that is like literally started in 6,000, right? Like maybe it did, but not that way. So right. I think it's really important to lay a lot of the blame for what we would see as issues with the bullshit Christianity that comes out of Roman Catholicism and eventually the Protestant Reformation, which is just two sides of the same dipshit coin of, we're going to worship reason as the greatest, rationality is the greatest thing in the world, or we're going to worship faith and irrationality as the greatest thing in the world. And it's like, well, I mean, can you have both things? Like, why can't we have both things? Right? Why do we have to raise reason to the point where reason becomes our God? And then we have to raise faith to the point where faith becomes our God. So now I have to have faith in faith, and I have to reason about reason. Like, what are we doing? So, I mean, if you're living at that time and you're a relatively intelligent, worldly person involved in the community or the court or whatever, I think it's pretty like reasonable to say, this is really dumb. Maybe we should try to fix the problems going on right now in the real world. Like, and then you have Francis Bacon and these guys who, that's what they want to do. They want to alleviate human suffering because they don't see in the church communities, in the church, the Roman Catholic Church, or these little Protestant things, right? They don't see anything being done there that is affecting their reality in any way. It's just a bunch of like chatter and like dumb shit. So it makes sense to me that Bacon, Descartes, Hobbes, that these guys would focus on what's going on right here and right now and forget about all that superfluous metaphysical baggage, because the metaphysical baggage is not itself comporting to reality. So I think I don't blame them for what they were doing, but I feel like people don't approach it that way, and they see orthodoxy as like another denomination, but it isn't. It's another religion. It's not the same religion as Western Christianity. We don't believe in the same things. We don't believe in the same God, right? We don't have the same Christ. We don't have the same church. We don't have the same belief system. We don't have the same like it's not the same thing. And that's not to say that it's, like I believe it's true, but I'm not trying to convert other people. I'm just saying that it's going to be very difficult to quote critique the West if you have a vested interest in the West, right? Because you're just going to get caught up in the same chatter that you're trying to critique. You're not going to get anywhere. Not to mention that with the internet, almost everybody thinks that they have like something important to say, or they can actually change the world. And the vast majority of people won't and should stop trying. So it like that's even more of a defeater because, like you said, the energy that goes into affecting these types of changes, well, like no one's going to do that, right? If they were going to do that, they would just go do it, right? No one talks about changing the world. That's actually they go out and they actually do it. So, I mean, I'm not like trying to let myself off the hook. I realize just blabbing about philosophy every day probably isn't accomplishing a whole bunch either, but like I'm not looking to do that on a grand scale. I'm not trying to influence things that way. I like looking at these things and they're fun to talk about, like what Trump's doing or what the Senate's doing or what, politics or economics. Like these tariffs are interesting. Let's talk about tariffs. But I mean, at the end of the day, like I have businesses to run. I have to figure out a way to make them profitable regardless of what's thrown in my way. Like I'm not going to change the world. I'm just going to adapt and do what I need to do. And if I can't do this, I'm going to go do something else. I have to provide for my family. And people are like, well, I mean, you run to food businesses, which are distinctly capitalistic and profit seeking. And, in a lot of ways, like we still lend it interest. Like we do all of these things that seem like they don't work with Orthodox Christianity, but that's not how Orthodox Christianity works. Like this is the world you're in. You have to deal with the world as it is and do your best to be a Christian in it, right? Like it's not off the hook. It's harder, I think, to be that type of person than to be the one out there trying to change everything all the time. It's easy to kind of just complain about everything.
It comes down, I think, the biggest thing is trust. People will talk about high trust, low trust. High low time preferences, zero time preferences. I've talked about it in terms of civil frame versus primal frame. This idea that everything is existential, everything's immediate. You got to deal with everything, right? Which increases that sense of anxiety, social and otherwise, that sort of nihilistic dread of like, well, if everything's horrible and bad, then nothing means anything, and it's better to believe that than try to put yourself out there and fail, right? Because the world's so crazy. The fundamental thing about, I think, people with faith, at least any discernible faith, even with, let's say, a devout Muslim, there's something then I can understand about you without knowing you. I can understand, let's say, the tenets of your faith, right? And let's say our relationship, Orthodox Christianity's relationship with Islam at any given moment, right? And that I know a lot about you and what you're likely to do and what you're unlikely to do. Now, you might be a good Muslim or a bad Muslim, or observing this or that, and I'll find that out. But in general, I have an idea of you before I have a relationship, and that's really important when you're dealing with, let's say, trade or a relationship that might have to be going on for decades, if not longer. The biggest problem in the West right now, especially with secular humanism, is there's no trust there. If you're basically saying that all morality is subjective, and therefore all your interactions with morality, or let's say a deal, is now subjective and subject to change on a whim, well, I can't trust you. And if I can't trust you, I can't have a relationship with you that's mutually beneficial. It's going to be augmented in some way, shape, or form, right? Like this can't stand. And I think that's kind of where we're gotten to now in the West. It's not only the external factors, like So no one in the world trusts us. We don't trust ourselves. We don't trust anyone in the system. We're run by the most corrupt, silly people. I'll put it that way. Maybe in all of history, or at least in the last few hundred years, and they're all corrupt. It's the kind of the bitter white pill I have when thinking about panopticons and digital IDs and all this other stuff. I'm looking around going, they're just going to screw this up. Like they're just going to make this unusable. It's going to crash. It's awful because even if there is an ideology at play here, and even if you have this little cadre of evil people who are all enacting this plan, the people they have to depend on to make this thing work are either stupid or so corrupt that they're never going to get along. So we're just going to watch this thing kind of fall under its own weight in some ways, or not, or something else enacted, put in its place to enforce that sort of order and morality that Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, pick your name, wants to see in the world. But even that's going to be temporary. I think that's kind of the my big pitch for people for orthodoxy is that there's this 2,000-year-old tradition that's been around, that's got survived in caves, has gone through massive tyrannies and all the rest of it, and survived in one shape or form, and has come back and is now, I think, emergent in the West because people are seeking that order and something that's grounded in truth, that big R reality that isn't dependent on our preferences, what Adam likes or I would prefer. When you go through catechism for people who are listening to this, I can't speak for everyone going through catechism. I won't make a blanket statement. What I'm going through is this idea of like, you need to submit to the authority of your priest, who's submitting to the authority of the church, who's submitting to the authority of the to God. And there's like this hierarchy of submission that in the West, that's it's a horrible term.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to submit to something. Even if you're a secular humanist, well, you're submitting to the will of the group, right? If that's
or yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, I made a couple notes while you were talking there. There's some good nuggets there, and maybe a way to talk about preference is like what you prefer, and anybody, what that person prefers to be the case is not something that exists separate from what they have in the past preferred. So like I could say I want the world to be XYZ way, but that doesn't exist outside of my own 43 years of life experience. Like if I had been raised in another country with different parents and a different, ethos or whatever, I would likely prefer completely different things than I currently prefer. So it makes it contextually and societally dependent. So to tie that in with what you're getting at, you can't have a trusting society when almost everyone is taking for granted a whole bunch of things that are not clear that they need to be taken for granted. Like the secular humanist, Enlightenment, modernity ethos, the libertarian ethos, the classical liberal ethos makes the assumption that that's the only way to think about the world. And if you're not thinking about the world that way, you're just wrong, which is just itself an ideology. So like, like nihilism, for example, would be, you brought this up and somebody in the chat was talking about nihilism. There's a great book by Michael Gillespie called Nihilism Before Nietzsche. I think that's the name of it. People ought to check that out if they like it. It traces the whole history of nihilism or nihilism, going back many centuries before Nietzsche kind of grabs it. But you're not going to be able to have a society of people who can trust each other if they're all coming at it from they're coming at their points of view from competing perspectives, but everyone is assuming that they're the same perspectives. Does that make sense? Maybe I'm not saying that like super clear. Like,
no, exactly. Yeah. The assumption always is that our preferences for any given thing is the correct preference. And again, this goes back to the secular humanism idea, is that if they just give themselves morality, just as a blanket term. It just exists somehow. GAD-SAD or some of these other guys try to tie it into some. I know, right? Remember that guy? Funny side quest. When I was living in Montreal, he lived in my neighborhood because he taught up at the university just up the street from me. So I'd see him wander a few times. I was like,
really?
hey, yeah, there's
so random.
Wave. We would not enjoy each other's company nowadays, but anyway,
he might be a fun guy to talk to. I mean, he seems like pretty open-minded to shit, even if he's going to critique it. So who knows? Anyways,
so he's an evolutionary psychiatrist, or whatever term he's using. And I remember his work is always trying to tie in morality to some sort of evolutionary trend. Like, we've evolved into this form of morality, even though that morality is not consistent, obviously, and also seems to be sometimes at odds with what we would call a evolutionary directive. Like, when you look in Christianity, a lot of the stuff is through sacrifice, through even egalitarianism, and tie it back to that. Someone asked me in a chat recently, it's like, why do the WASPs allow all this stuff to happen? And my response is, well, guilt and materialism. You put those two things together, kind of, and out comes this.
I mean, who says they allowed it to happen?
Right. Well, there's
another, like, maybe they wanted it to happen. Maybe they didn't have a choice. Maybe allowed isn't the right word. Maybe it's just the natural outcome of that way of thinking.
And I think that's the kernel that we're trying to get to. So my daughter's in the room listening to and I just realized I think she's got pink eye, so I'm gonna have to deal with that. So yeah,
I'm glad I'm over here.
Yeah. All right. So, but I think that's the kernel of it, right? Is that when we're examining this thing, and for people who are onboarding, obviously my audience is either Orthodox Christian or starting to observe or curious. That's why they're listening to me over the last few years. The thing you have to almost combat is that this morality that everyone's assuming isn't natural. It has to be learned and has to be applied. It's natural in the sense that it comes from God. Sure, here's your energies, but we still have to adopt them, and interact with them. We still have to use them and use them correctly. Otherwise, the good, the beautiful, the true can be inverted into ugly gray buildings and whatever the hell's going on in Hollywood these days, and Ozempic face and all this other stuff, like true inversions. And anyone who has any kind of sense of the good, the beautiful, true, look at this and go, well, that's not right. Like, that can't be real. The whole Sydney Sweeney thing, I don't know if you've been paying attention to that, but like, everyone's getting all hot and bothered about it, right? Because it's like the most minor step towards beauty again, like actual authentic beauty on some level, and it's not authentic.
I'm pretty sure she is the perfect female.
Right.
I don't know how you get any better than her. Just throw it in the towel. We're done. No more civilization. Sydney Sweeney's the perfect woman. We're all done.
That's
we're
all
going.
Yeah. She's got great genes, Adam. That's the whole thing.
I'd love to see him on my
store. Right. So, okay, let's deal with the kernel then, right? And I won't keep it for much longer.
Go ahead. It's fine.
But so that kernel of common morality that most of these ideas kind of hang themselves on or hang us from, how do we if you're going to posit solutions, like ideas for people to start to attack that idea inside them, where would you advise people to look? Like, where do you think that kernel? How do you think that kernel is substantiated? What's substantiating those kernels in the modern world, and how can we start to undo that knot?
You mean of morality specifically? Yeah.
Of, let's say, secular, let's say assumed morality.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think the issue when we talk about that, people ought to spend some time in like a Buddhist country or a Hindu country, somewhere that isn't part of the West, and this will make a little bit more sense to them. Western, quote, morality, it seems very imposed. If you follow the history of the Roman Catholic Church, if you look at the Protestant Reformation, the wars in Europe, the religious wars, and the way that a modern day secular humanist or atheist would kind of look at things, morality they think of Christianity as morality, Christianity itself being morality. Like God gave commandments, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that. And that's what Christianity is. Christianity is controlling you and making you into this person. And that's what you have to be because God said so. And if you don't do it, God's going to send you to hell for all of eternity. You're going to get punished. And that's why I say, like, it's not the same religion. We don't believe any of that stuff. Orthodox Christianity is not a morality. Christianity is not morality. Christianity is a way of living in the world that, by the extension of living in the world, has you act in a way that we term moral, right? But we just calling it that, right? Like, does you live in Australia, right? So does a mother kangaroo taking care of her little baby kangaroo, is that moral? I mean, it makes sense to propagate the species in some way from an animal point of view, right? It's not, nothing's imposing upon that kangaroo mom to, put a gun to her head and say, make sure your kid stays in the pocket and gets milk and fed and nourished and grows up to be a big kangaroo again. Like, so, and that's Western Christianity's own fault that it did that to itself, because through all of their stupid, like, Anselmian atonement theories and bullshit scholastic nonsense and the Protestant Reformation, they did that to themselves, so that now people have an idea of morality that it's an imposable thing. But morality, separate from a paradigm, is just an opinion. And if the paradigm is a human paradigm, then it's just a big opinion. So, and that's not clear to them, to most of these people, because they're still working on a Western Christian presupposition of what morality is. And that is not what morality is. I need to make that very clear. It's not what morality is. It's not an ethical system. It's not a moral system. It's not being nice to people. It's not holding the door open for an old lady, right? It's not any of that stuff. Those things are good. You should do those things. But that's not what Christianity is. Christianity is bigger than that. It's an entire worldview and paradigm. And so it'll help you reconstitute the definitions of these words and like I said before, comport them more to a reality that is going to, if everyone were to do this somehow, like, probably never happen, but if you get a good enough amount of people together, like, society will itself just change underneath you, right? Like, it's interesting to think about. You mentioned Peter Thiel earlier, Elon Musk, like, these guys who sort of like the tech aristocracy that Plato talks about in the Republic is kind of what they're basing their whole thing on. And, like, the only reason that Peter Thiel would want to be someone in that position is because it benefits Peter Thiel, right? He's not like some selfless, I just can't wait to take care of the little guy. Like, no, it benefits him and his money, and, like, he wants to be seen in a certain light. It's an ego thing. Like, by extension, it might be helpful. Maybe he would be good at it, right? But he's not driven by anything other than a sense of himself, which I'm certain of that. Whether or not that is good, I mean, whatever, we could debate that. But the way that you get a morality that works is, you don't worry about Peter Thiel. You go talk to your next door neighbor. You have a barbecue with the people in your neighborhood. You raise your kids the way you want to raise your kids. You don't take, you don't take no for an answer when someone tries to tell you to do something that you don't want to do. But you also have to understand that, like, being a constant rebel and isolating yourself from everybody in the world is also not a productive thing. Like, there's a middle between the dialectic. The dialectic doesn't resolve. The dialectic is vanquished because we don't need binaries. We need, I don't want someone to take that too far to, like, male or female or something, but these false dialectics where we've created these binaries out of nothing, and then we're stuck bouncing back and forth. Like, we need to stop doing all of that. Now, people could say, like, well, I don't want to do that. Well, all right, well, then here you are, and you're going to be here until you're not anymore. There's not going to be a fix for it. Peter Thiel is not going to save you. Elon Musk is not your friend. Donald Trump is not your friend. Kamala Harris is not your friend. None of these people give a shit about you. Like, what they're doing might benefit you, right? But that's not why they're doing it. Donald Trump wants to be remembered a particular way, and so he's going to act in a way that makes him remembered that way. But he's not your friend. He doesn't care about you. So, I mean,
yeah,
I was just going to tie in and say, when I started down the Orthodox trail, it was very functional for me. I was basically pulling a good Nietzschean, right? Like, you come up with a morality that works for you, fool yourself into thinking that it's true. Remind yourself occasionally that it isn't. But if it works, it works. If it's functional, it's functional. That's a very Nietzschean way of looking at morality. And then over time, as one would assume would be the case, it actually does change you. And it does, if you commit to it, the same way committing to being a communist would change you, or committing to be a cannibal would change you, right? How many people would you have to eat before you started to believe cannibalism comported to reality? You know what I mean? Like, so
at least one, right? It's like
3,
starting
4,
point.
Yeah,
maybe you do one, you feel bad about it. You're like, oh, don't know about this, right? The second one gets a little bit easier. Like, okay, well, it's kind of tasty, especially the thigh.
Which race do you think has the most nutrition? Never heard anybody talking about that on these right-wing podcasts, right?
This is true.
More vitamins and minerals in the Somalians. I don't know how that works.
Well, who would you imagine? I mean, obviously,
we do a whole show just on that. We just break down every single country and like the vitamins, minerals.
Would like people from warmer climates be more like raisins? Like sort of sun-kissed. You're getting more of the nutrients kind of cooked in.
I'm just saying, raisins, by the way, are the laziest food item that human beings have ever. Like, well, just let this thing rot, and then we'll just try to pretend it's like a good thing for you.
Yeah, sun-dried, right? Everything's sun. You come from restaurants, so you put sun-dried tomatoes or something like that on the menu. You can charge an extra $10 for it. That's how this works,
right? And we've gotten so far with this that we don't even do that. We take the tomatoes, we put it in an oven with olive oil and salt and parsley, and then we sun dry it in there. Right. We don't even actually sun dry it. Like, this is how stupid we are.
It's basically people who are like, for people who pickling was too labor intensive. Like, we got to get a jar. Do we have a jar? No, not really. Okay, what do? We got to do something with this. Just leave it on a rock. Leave it on a rock in the sun. See what happens. Just see what happens and see if it's tasty. It's edible. Did he die? No. Oh, okay. It's better than the mushrooms then. Good. So we can put that in the safety column.
It's actually funny that all of our delicacies in the culinary arts, every delicacy we have was at one point like the dirtiest peasant food ever, right? And all the stuff that we consider like staples are the things that people would have killed for millennia, so
just like meat, like dude,
like I get meat literally. There's like 300 places within a half a block of here where I can go get meat. Like, and imagine if you're living in the 1300s, like having a steak. Holy shit, dude! You know what I mean?
And a relatively fresh one, like not that something that's been like dried and like and heavily salted to the point where you're like, well, it is meat. I mean, technically, but how much do you like jerky? Let's end on this, because here's another little point. Andrew Wilson has been talking a lot, especially in debates with secular humanists and those kind of folks, about Mo rights, right? Everyone gets down to Mo rights, and his point is that absent of rights are essentially gifts that are absent of responsibility or duty, because you don't have a duty to. You have a right to own arms in the United States, but you don't have a duty to. You don't have to have a gun. But you can if you'd like to. The thing that kind of substantiates rights in the background of all this is force doctrine. It's something that he's coined, which is basically the threat of violence. It has to be present on some level. If you go far back enough, you don't pay you have speeding tickets. If you don't pay them, eventually they will throw you in jail. Now, obviously, it takes a little while to get there, but that is the open threat. The more I think about this, when you go back to stories in the Bible, like let's say Abraham and Isaac, that's oftentimes a go-to for a lot of atheists. Like, how could a good moral God allow this? Why would he do this? And reading Kierkegaard recently too, he brings this up. If we assume that the central part of our fallen nature is violence, in a general sense, right? Physical violence, some sort of actual violence. And that we make these things either profane or sacred, depending on what kind of violence we're talking about, what time we're talking about it. It seems to me that most of these philosophies and religion itself is looking for ways to transcend or to put violence into places where it does, let's say, minimal harm. right? Or harm only to those intended and not to those unintended. So the unintended consequences of violence. We can see this obviously even with the Eucharist. So we go from the story of Abraham Isaac, which is we can receive it as sort of a general declaration that no more human sacrifice, right? If you're going to follow this God and you're doing human sacrifice, that's off the table. We're not doing that. You can sacrifice animals instead, right? That's now official. That's what you're doing. We get to Christ and Eucharist, and now we're transferring it to you're going to eat in my body and drink in my blood in terms of the symbolism of the bread and the wine, to the point where, as in Orthodox, we believe these things actually transform into this. But again, it's this transference of the violent tendencies of man and putting it into places that aren't obviously conflict violence, that are in sort of, I'm trying to find the right way of, maybe you can help me with this, to phrase this, but putting it into its rightful place, making that violence sacred in a way, and keeping it from infecting the rest of society. This is, I know you don't like Girard that much, but this is central to a lot of Girardian thinking.
I like Girard. I think his one idea is a little bit elaborated on, like, over the course of his career, but it's a good idea, and he's useful. First of all, I like the way you laid that out. Let's, for the sake of argument, let's assume that, for the sake of argument, Christianity is not true, right? It's made up by human beings. It's syncretic, right? It's just, we're going to take some stuff from Greek world, or we're going to take some stuff from the Jewish world, take some stuff from Eastern religion world, and we're going to
it's our first attempt at a self-help book. Okay, that's what it is.
I mean, and to be fair, it's like every belief system is kind of a self-help book. Like Plato is trying to sell you a self-help book. Aristotle is trying to sell you. Boethius is trying to sell you whoever, Buddha, Muhammad, Frank Smith down the road, right? Everyone's trying to sell you a self-help book. But why does Christianity, and specifically Orthodox Christianity, why does it, quote, work so well? Like, if human beings did syncretically put everything together and figure out, like you said, transferring violence to this more productive, like almost a Dexter level of, like, how do I use this in a productive way? Like, I'm going to be a heart surgeon instead of a serial killer, kind of an idea, right? Why does it work so well? And it works so well because it does what you just said and all of the other things that you could possibly think of. It somehow, and I think it's because it's true, but even if you were to just throw it out there as just another one of many other possible paradigms that you could live in, I feel like I've done a good amount of legwork over 30 years of exploring the in-depth, the depths of as many paradigms or worldviews as I could come across. And none of these things hold a candle to reality and the human condition, or whatever, however you want to word that thing that you're talking about. None of them can do what Orthodox Christianity can do. None of them. I mean, there's probably something to be said for, like, Coptic or Oriental Orthodoxy or something like that. Like, that would be a long conversation. I think there's some claims that could be made there. You'd have to talk. We'd go on for hours.
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, yeah, maybe. Yeah, probably. I mean, it wouldn't hurt. But I mean, I think the reason it works so well is because it's transcendentally and immanently true. But even if it isn't, like, if you really look at it like it's just functionally, pragmatically true, why not just do it for that reason? Like, what would be the hold up there? Like, your ego. Oh, I need to be an individual. I can't let the church tell me what to do. Like, and then what? You're going to die anyway. You want to be an individual and then die? Like, so what? Like, what does that do? What have you accomplished by being this radical individual? Oh, I don't like people to tell me what to do, but you're still going to get cancer and you're still going to die. So why do that to yourself? Why ostracize other people from you? Like, people will maybe take some of the stuff that we're saying out of context. I'm not saying that people shouldn't, act moral and ethical and take care of each other and be friendly. And no, all of those things are good. All the things that the progressives want and the conservatives want, we want all those same things too. Like, those are natural things to want. I'm not hating on them for wanting them, right? I'm just saying that the way they're going about trying to get those things doesn't comport to reality. And that's why they're not successful. Like, you're not going to be a successful stockbroker if you spend every waking minute eating cereal and not trading stocks. Like, It's kind of obvious. So if you want to see a world in which, I don't know, there's peace and people get along and there's no violence, and if that's what you want, then here is a worldview that will get you that. Now, if you decide not to take it, well, then honestly, fuck you and what you want and your preferences, because we offered it to you and you chose to do something else. And you chose to do something else because you're either too lazy, it doesn't, you're too full of your own shit, you think it's too hard. Like, you're making excuses and then going out and trying to change the world anyway, which isn't going to work. So I just think, like, why not give the study of this stuff a shot? And you don't have to do like I do and read every single book on orthodoxy you can get for the last 5 years. Like, I have no money left. I'm buying so many freaking books. Just go to an Orthodox church. Just go to the liturgy. Go to Matins. Go to Vespers. Even go to like the, a funeral ceremony, like a service like that, or a wedding if the church is open. Talk to the priest. Get involved in the community. Just do that. And just see what happens. Because that's what I did. I didn't, I thought on paper Orthodoxy made a lot more sense than Roman Catholicism and Protestantism, for sure. But I went into it thinking, I'm just going to do this because it's useful. And it ended up convincing me that it was more than useful. Now, maybe it just becomes useful for these people, whatever. But why not do something useful instead of a whole bunch of shit that's not useful? It just seems like that's American pragmatism 101, right? Talking about like John Stuart Mill and Dewey and these goobers. Like, that's what, just do what works, right? Well, democracy and classical liberalism don't work. Sorry, guys. So why don't we do the thing that works and see where we go from there?
Well, I think they especially don't work when we're not, let's say this, democracy, ideologies, etc., depending on which ideology we're talking about. Let's say nominal liberalism, classic liberalism, whatever you want to define it as, right? Democratic liberalism. It's one derivation out from reality, right? It's assuming that all human beings in the way it's being done now could possibly vote on a leader and make informed good choices on that voting principle. Okay, so that's one derivation away from real big reality. But okay, if we're taking from a pool of people who are all working within the same dynamics of what is required, what is your responsibilities, what are your duties, what are your hard, what are your taboos? Like, if lying, just to use a simple one, if lying is on the table and becomes subjective, like, well, sometimes you lie and sometimes you don't, and if try not to, but if you do, no big deal, right? Maybe you get called out on it and you face some social repercussions, but overall you can live through that and make your apologies and get on with your life. Well, if you're living in that world, then we get down to trust, and the erosion of trust gets us back down to violence, because eventually, if you remove all the other things that are allowing us to transcend violence, or put violence in some place where it's no longer physical or immediate, then you're going to get to a place where the real deal physical violence has to now be onboarded. It's going to be adopted, because the one thing about violence, it's honest. Like, there's no more honesty in the world than punching someone in the nose, right? Or getting punched in the nose. There's truth. You can't. It's not subjective. It's not it's not theory. It's just happened to you. What's the old Mike Tyson line? Everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah, right.
And that's where I think we're speed running to that realization. One of the biggest missteps, you think about Gamergate, is always brought up as this where a lot of people got on board into this culture war, or whatever you want to call it. The interesting thing about that is that part of the attack on Gamergate was a bunch of young men playing video games saying awful things in game servers while they're playing. But there's your transcendence of violence. One, you're playing a violent video game, but it's a video game. It's not real violence. And you're saying awful things, but you're saying it to a group that understands that this is acceptable in this area, and that's it. This little arena, you can say all this stuff. There's your transference of violence. Well, when they go after all those things and they're taking the violence out of video games, or making that bad, awful behavior, and certainly when the participants in the game are now being policed and being told they're bad and awful, and you can't say those things. Well, now the violence can't exist in speech, which is maybe not great, but hell of a lot better than punching someone in the face. We can all agree on that. Now you're getting to, well, we'll just punch people in the face part of it, because you can't get away from the violence. Like, we can lie about everything else, but that seems to be front and center, a feature, not a bug of our fallen nature. And all you can really do is find better ways of using it, or transmuting it, into something that's more useful, or at least less harmful. So I don't want to beat a dead horse on this, and we should wrap up. But
well, it's like the old joke where somebody cuts their arm, right, and the doctor comes over and says, "Oh, I could fix that," and then grabs an axe and chops off the entire arm, and like, right. Well, there you go, we solved it, right? That's kind of what I see Western civilization doing. He's got these little like fissures that are going on over time, and rather than deal with those and heal, you would have, first of all, you would have to accept that there is a healing possible, right? We have to agree on that as a collective, kind of, right? Like, this is an issue that's cut here. We have to first identify that. Then we have to identify, well, how do we want to solve it? Is it a problem? Like, maybe it's not a problem. Maybe it's good for like some people used to think that bloodletting would make you healthier. Like, no, it isn't good. It's good to patch this up. It's not good to chop the arm off. Like, a lot of these things, it seems like if you're a materialist atheist, they're just trial and error. Like, oh, we figured out in 2025, we don't chop people's arms off anymore. So now we're just going to make that the moral law. It's like, I mean, can we think bigger than this somehow? That recognize, first of all, if you're going to recognize a problem, it has to be a problem for a reason. Like, you should be able to say why it's a problem, right? Why don't I like this? There was somebody in the comments who was like, I don't vote, but I look at the society around me. That's how I know it's broken. Like, yeah, but like, what do you mean, no, it's broken? Like, what does that even mean? I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. Yeah. But on a vast macro level, like, not everybody sees it the way you do. And so what makes your way of seeing it, quote, better than the opposite way of seeing it? Like, if you don't have a society that can have that conversation, all you're going to have is animosity and the type of violence, transferred or not, that you're, Jason, bringing up. Like, that's the eventual end game, because no one can agree on the reason why we're doing things. We all kind of want the same shit: peace, love, equality, whatever. But there's mutually exclusive ways to get there. To me, the only way that ends is in violence, or like coom pods. Those are the only two options. Or you can become an Orthodox Christian and be done with the whole freaking lot of it.
And there we go. Full circle. Look at that, folks. Look at what we're doing. Yeah. Just because Adam hasn't done one of these in a while doesn't mean he doesn't know how to do them.
Shout out to Zach Putnam, who's in the chat there. My man was at my wedding.
Go. Oh, really?
Good man. Yeah.
He's saying it's now illegal in Minecraft also. Yeah. I think it was the bitter white pill here for a lot of this stuff is that there's been so many unforced errors. If history is still taught, if we're still allowed to even examine, if they haven't whitewashed this by AI or something like that, I think people in 100 years, or certainly my grandkids, will look back on COVID and go, well, there was your misstep. Like, that was the overreach of all overreaches, to the point where it just made it broke it broke the frame. It broke the illusion that because it certainly did for me, that whole Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian thing, right? Like, okay, we all may have differences, opinions, and sure, I live in Quebec and some others in Ontario, but hey, we're all Canadian, eh? Like, we all believe in the same basic principles. And then lockdowns happen. Like, well, I guess I was wrong.
Right.
I'm either stupid or naive, or something's wrong with my reality, because it's not like I invented that. I didn't come up with it and say, well, that's all what Canadians are like. It's like that was enforced. The propaganda for my entire time, my entire life, Canadian heritage moments. I mean, this is what a Canadian is: Canadian, Canadian, Canadian. And then when push comes to shove, it wasn't that. All the post-libertarians, Matt Erickson and others, had that moment with libertarianism. Like, okay, here's the moment, right? Here's the moment where the rubber meets the road. Libertarian ethics, values, all these great ideas. Lockdowns happen, and everyone scurries off, and what did your balls drop off? Like, where are your big ideas now? Where's your fix?
We went from have it. We went from peacetime ideologies to wartime ideologies. Like, COVID is probably, at least for our generation, the most important thing that's going to happen in our lifetime. I used to think it was 9/11, but that didn't really do what COVID did. And it was just,
No.
it's the weirdest thing because COVID is such a, like a stupid nothing burger of a thing, but it really like opened up everyone's eyes, regardless of their political background or ideology, sometimes mutually exclusive, right? So where people now, I guess with the advent of the internet technology, podcasts, you know, YouTube, the ability now to forcefully project their own ideologies out into the ether for anyone to hear. And it gave them permission to do that and the avenue to explore those things. And I think, to go to your point about honesty, I would rather have all of that out in the open where it can be dealt with one way or the other than to do what we've been doing since the dawn of the post-war consensus, which is just all live in a little fairy tale as if we're dreaming through reality. We all just pretend we agree on the same shit. We all knew that we didn't agree on things, but we just pretended like we did. And now we don't have to do that anymore. We don't have to pretend that we agree. We disagree. We fundamentally freaking disagree. And that needs to be said and hammered home as many times as possible until there's some solution reached. And it's not dialectical. We're splitting the dialectic. We're ripping that shit apart. And we're not going to let this become peacetime ideologies anymore. And I don't think it'll ever go back to that. Now, whatever people do with that, maybe we'll destroy ourselves. But I think lulling into a zombie state of your life is worse than having it out and kind of duking it out in the court of public opinion. So, you know, we try to like look for the best in people and hope that it doesn't result in World War III or people getting shot in the streets. But, you know, maybe that's just what needs to happen right now. Maybe not shooting people in the street, but people need to have this discourse to get it out. Like, it's like confession for the entire planet. Everybody's just confessing all at once, getting all this pent up rage and animosity and anxiety and stress. And, you know, put down your fucking beta blockers and go out there and alpha your shit. Like, let's get this done so we can move on and figure out what we're going to do next. I think there's I have a lot of hope and positivity for where this whole thing is going based on all of that. So we'll see. But I mean, like I said, I'm going to focus on it as it's all a positive move.
I agree. I'm the same way. And as I told everyone, it's later than you think. Therefore, we must hasten to do the work of God. But that's a whole different conversation for another day. We'll do that sometime. People hear that and they think the eschaton's tomorrow. It's like, no. Don't think about tomorrow. Think about what you're doing today, and understand that it's on you, but it's not all on you. Like you have duties and responsibilities for yourself and your family and your own inner sicknesses that you have to get a cure for, that you have to heal. That's what the Orthodox Church is there for, if nothing else. You know, and as someone who's, you know, been doing this for haphazardly for the last few years, and now just started going to liturgy all the time and doing that process, it works. It really works. Like,
yes, it does.
And it works in ways that I can't explain to you. You guys got to do it. Adam, thank you so much. We're gonna end it there. I appreciate you, my friend. We'll have you back on soon, because this is fun. We do this thing where we don't talk for a few months, and I'm like, oh yeah, Adam, we should talk. Because
well, you know, that's what normal people do. They don't talk for a few months and then they pick right up where they left off. They're not like, hey man, where you been? You're being a dick and ignoring me, like a bunch of little girls. So like, thank God that, you know, this community, by the way, is just a bunch of really cool people. Like, you're one of them, but everybody you mentioned, whatever. I'm very happy to be a part of it. And anytime you want to talk, man, you just let me know the time in the day, and I'm there.
Fantastic. I know the show's on a little bit of hiatus, but if you have anything to plug away, and then we'll send the people on their way.
Yeah, you can go to the Age of Information YouTube. Some of it's up on podcatchers. I don't really keep up with that much, but all the videos are on YouTube, going, I think, all the way back to 2000. So you can hear some really cringe shit if you go back. But also, I think a lot of those conversations are really good and they're timeless. They're pretty evergreen. So, I mean, if you haven't listened to the previous ones, I wouldn't expect you anticipating to get new ones soon. So go catch up on those. And then when I eventually do put stuff out, you'll be ready to go.
Zach says, happy belated anniversary, by the way. Many years to you, many years to everyone in the chat. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in. We will put this, I'll do the editing and post and put it up on all the podcatchers and Substacks and all that stuff later in the week. So follow me on X for to find out more about that. I'll be back if you're watching this on YouTube. Obviously, you're watching this on YouTube. We're watching this future. I'll be back on Kick later on tonight, playing some The King is Watching, which is a fantastic game, and we'll play a little bit of that and talk to folks. And of course, support the show any way you can. Like, subscribe, share the videos whenever you find them. And of course, donate if you can through Streamlabs or PayPal, or buying a membership, gifting a membership, or sending some bucks on YouTube's. I appreciate each and every one of you who help support, and we'll be talking to you soon. I am Jason Mironchuck, and it's later today.